Alright, I am back with another Destiny video, and we are circling back to talk about a extremely popular topic, Stasis. Evie, you gonna hang out right here? Okay, leave you there for now. Stasis and its effect on PvP. This was inspired by dabbling in Trials of Osiris this weekend and seeing kind of Stasis being as bad as it's ever been. We are now at a point where Stasis has been nerfed a few times by Bungie in different ways. The last round of nerfs focusing on PvP especially, almost everything they did to Stasis last time was based on things that only applied to damage to Guardians, things like that. And that's how we got the Dustfield Grenade nerf, we got Hunter, whatever they're called, Ice Throwing Stars nerfed, Glacial Quake got nerfed, there was a lot of stuff. However, it is not really, Evie, what are you squeaking? It does not really fundamentally change the dynamics of Stasis' use in PvP. At least in my Trials experience, it is more common than not to get a game that is 6 Stasis users of all classes, but especially so Titans and Hunters. I think I played all of this weekend without seeing a single Hunter or Titan that was not using Stasis. Warlock, there are still some Dawnblades that are competing because Dawnblade is, can be very good in very certain circumstances and is a top tier PvP class. And then there's some Chaos Reach users as well. The whole Thresh is game changing for super fast Chaos Reach meta has not really panned out from what I can see. And even though that's Trials, even if you go in something like Quick Play, it's still probably usually at least a 50% Stasis use rate, even in kind of more casual PvP, which when there's 4 subclasses, a 50% use rate is still not good, even if it's not maybe the 80-90% that you see in Trials. And it's been 5 months now since Stasis was introduced. Everyone kind of thought this was going to happen when they heard Stasis existed as a class, how is freezing and slowing going to work in PvP? And sure enough, it doesn't and never has. And Stasis has kind of fundamentally transformed PvP, where we have these cycles now where people just get so frustrated with Stasis, then everyone has their big take on Twitter and everyone kind of just rants about Stasis for a while, and then we just deal with it for a month and then we go rant again, and now we're in the rant cycle. I'm not the biggest PvP player in the world, but in my PvP experience that I do partake in, it's bad. I find myself feeling like I have to use it on most of my classes, or else I am even less competitive than usual. And I feel like that's how what a number of people feel like. And in Quick Play and stuff like that, I think people, at least some of the people that are not using Stasis, is because it's tied to Beyond Light and they're free to play players that do not have access to it. So in some senses, Stasis is kind of pay to win, considering how dominant it is against other classes. In this video, I wanted to kind of expand on the article I wrote about this today, kind of going into the solutions that people are proposing for Stasis, in that they don't really work. I don't think I've heard of a single Stasis solution that has been community proposed, or even ones that I've thought of in my own brain that actually would probably work in practice. And we've seen some fixes attempted on Bungie's side, which may have made things better, but I don't think anyone would say that Stasis is where it needs to be and in a balanced place. Even if it is less crazy than it was at launch, you're still in a situation where, 4, 5, or 6 people in every 3v3 game are using Stasis. And you don't want those rates to be that high. That is just too much. So the fixes I've seen, okay, so what if we change all freezes to 1 second? That's almost where we are now in a lot of ways. When you're getting frozen most often, these days it's by Cold Snap Grenades, which are the 1 second freeze, or a Warlock Melee, which is a 1 second freeze. And that allows for some more survivability, but it's more like the 3 or 4 second freeze or whatever it was before is just absurd. That's kind of the difference. And for stuff like supers, for especially the Titan and Warlock supers, the freeze is still kind of indefinite, to the point where if it hits you, you are almost guaranteed to die unless someone kills the person using their super, or you're around the luckiest corner on Earth and can escape in time, but you are almost certainly dead. So I don't think just reducing all freezes to 1 second would really fix that problem, even in situations because it's only specific to really kind of those 2 situations now at this point. They've nerfed the Hunter throwing stars, so they don't freeze you after 2, so that's not really a thing anymore. And that kind of leads to the next change is, okay, no more freezing in PvP. Everything just slows you instead. As I think you might have seen, a lot of the problems people have with stasis is the slowing, not necessarily just the freezing, because slowing in a game with such low time to kill and like weapons that are just, bursting you down in under a second sometimes, like even being slowed for a brief period of time is enough to lose you the fight. That's why you can like throwing star someone, and then like you will, if they're in view to be in a gunfight, you will almost certainly beat them because they're slowed, and being slowed is terrible in a game like Destiny where it like reduces like ability regen, it destroys your accuracy, like it cripples you in every possible way to the point where it's borderline almost like being frozen. So you can change all the freezes to slows, and I still don't think it will really have an effect on you. I have noticed someone brought this up, where they changed the stacks of slow from, I think it was 1 to 10 to now 1 to 100. And people mentioned that now that they're going to introduce stasis weapons, they think that the stasis weapons might proc like stacks of slow. And I'm like, oh my God, can you imagine if they had stasis elemental weapons that started to like build up slow on you just from being shot? Good Lord, let's hope that doesn't happen. There are further solutions like make frozen players play no damage. Then you're in kind of like a weird like armor lock situation where you have this like pillar of a player just like sitting there, and then people just have to wait for them to unfreeze before they like shotgun them or something. I don't really know what that would solve other than really warping the flow of combat weirdly and have people waiting around for people to unfreeze so they can die. I don't know. I don't see that as a good solution. I keep hearing this one: shoot frozen teammates to unfreeze them. Okay, but like in practice, okay, the 1 second freezes, like, what are you going to take like a quarter of a second off that freeze if you divert your focus to shoot your frozen teammate? Not to mention that would probably require an entirely new tracking system because there is no auto aim on your own teammates, so that would be harder than it sounds, and it would potentially take your aim off of an enemy that was near them. And then for like the big 4 second freezes, like someone's probably supering them nearby, and you probably don't want to be wasting your time trying to unfreeze your teammate when there is a supering tornado or warlock roaming next to you. So I don't know. I don't think that would do anything, and I think that would create more problems than it solves. Another popular one: have solar abilities directly counter stasis. Okay, look, I understand the intent here, but this is like opening a can of worms like no other. Like, okay, so the idea here, it depends, but like you could either like melt yourself instantly if you're a solar subclass or something, or like you can't be frozen. So like you would have an entire subclass that is not just like counterplay, it would be a hard counter, like stasis abilities wouldn't even work on a solar class, which I think is far too much. I'm okay with like a middle ground, maybe that like solar supers can't be frozen or something, but like even that is a little awkward. And then that raises the question of like, okay, so the only elemental interaction we're having is solars being good against stasis, but like there's 4 subclasses, so like do they have to like then make like void is good against arc, and arc is good against solar, and like that would be like an entirely new damage system to come up with. That would be like Genshin Impact, like elemental combinations. And like I'm not going to say no to like the long-term implementation of like more elemental effects in the game, but like this is something that is like transformative of the entire kind of Destiny elemental and damage system just to combat stasis. So like this is a huge kind of move for the game if they were to implement something like that, and it couldn't be just as simple as like, okay, you can't freeze the solar subclass or something like that. Like that, it sounds good maybe in theory, but if you think about it for like 2 seconds, like I don't think it would work. There's just, further nerfs, this and that, like more, less damage reduction on supers. You can't freeze people out of their super. And then that's weird because then you can, there are no super to super counters for stasis at all when other supers can shut down other supers. So that gets very complicated. And then ultimately we arrive at the ultimate solution, which is often kind of proposed as a last resort, which is either take stasis out of PvP or take stasis out of competitive PvP modes, namely trials, maybe survival, maybe Iron Banner. So you just go back to the 3 light subclasses. Oh, sorry. One other thing everyone says is just buff all the light subclasses to be as good as Stasis. That doesn't solve the problem of Stasis being as good as it is, like, and the fundamental concept of freezing and slowing and stuff. Like, you can't just like give all the other super classes more damage and that like fixes the problem. That probably again just creates more problems of balance. So if the solution is to remove it, like I am almost at the point where I'm willing to say like screw it, just do it, like at least in competitive modes. But that seems like just totally throwing in the towel, like, and just admitting that Stasis is like an abject failure to PvP and there is no hope for it. And maybe there is no hope for it, as I think I said in my thumbnail here. Like, maybe it is hopeless in trying to make it work with PvP, because like I use this analogy in my article, but like it's not like there's no other PvP game that has ever had a freezing weapon or a freezing class or something. But so you have a game like Overwatch where you have Mei, the freezing character, who has all these stasis-like moves with the ice wall and the AoE freeze and, freezing people solid. But at most there's one Mei a team. And in Destiny, there are no restrictions like that. So it is, anywhere from 6 to 12 players using Stasis at a time. So it's not just like one player going around freezing someone, and Mei has like some pretty hard counters, this and that, and she has some pretty sharp downsides. But in Destiny, it's a totally different ballgame when everyone can use this one ability, and it creates a nightmarish hellscape of frozen people. So removing it is like, because we know we're going to get more darkness subclasses, and what's the rule going forward there? Like, no darkness subclasses allowed in Crucible. Like, they write this into the story where Saladin and Shaxx get together and convince Saint that we gotta ban all the darkness from Crucible because it's too evil and whatever. Like, yeah, that'd be kind of a funny story turn. But like, what if the next subclass is not problematic? So you only ban Stasis, and it's just left in this awkward state where it's just the one thing you can't use in PvP. Like, it's very awkward, but guess what? It's also pretty awkward to have a PvP mode entirely dominated by one subclass and spending the next year or two or more nerfing various aspects of Stasis to try and make it work. Like, is the better solution to just hard remove it from PvP, and we can end all this drama and you move on and like see what the new subclass brings next year or whenever it comes, and like just kind of stop dealing with this. And like, I know there have been situations in the past in PvP where it's like something just feels utterly dominant. Like we're dealing with that right now with like Fellwinners, and like there's always something, and then it's usually like a weapon or one branch of one subclass or in one class specific thing. Like, it is always pretty specific and can be very specifically targeted for nerfs, whereas the Stasis problem is an entire subclass for all 3 classes with all of these whispers and fragments and all of their abilities all combined together. And there are very few things in there that are not slowing or freezing or contributing to the problem in some way. So like, it is a much larger problem than I think PvP has ever faced in the entire history of Destiny, just because the entire concept. And like, it sucks because like I know why they made Stasis, and like, it is very fun to use in PvP or PvE, and it is not overpowered. Like, some tactics you can like freeze and unfreeze an enemy, and then you do more super damage to him with the seasonal mod. But like, it is in nowhere breaking PvE the way it's breaking PvP, and it's a very solid addition to the game in PvE. And it's good that the changes they've made recently are separating out, things from PvE. But like, it's just, this is kind of the dichotomy of Destiny, where Destiny's always struggled balancing PvE and PvP, but kind of never to this degree. Usually it's about like toning down an exotic in PvE so it's not crazy in PvP or something like that. Whereas this is like, they almost had no chance to balance it in PvP, so they didn't even try. And then now here we are 5 months later after like 3 different sets of nerfs, and we're still getting 3v3 Stasis matches, every weekend in trials. Like, it's a problem that is not going away, and none of the solutions have done anything except make it slightly less or slightly more tolerable in very specific circumstances as you're using it. And like, cool, now there's no more dust field spam. Now it's just, cold snap spam and still shuriken spam. Like, it's, at a certain point, then you just eventually, like, you go too far and then you nerf something into oblivion to the point where it might as well not exist at all. I don't think we're approaching that point, certainly, but it's hard to know where they go from here. And I feel like they're probably just going to keep trying to do more rounds of nerfs and stuff, but like, this is a problem. And I don't think that people saying like, oh, just counterplay it and like whatever, like most of the time counterplay involves also using stasis or just like shotgun hopping and like just things that are, happening anyway. And I don't think that is, the just counter it strategy is a viable thing. And it's not about like that there is no way to ever counter stasis. It's the fact that you feel like you are at a disadvantage if you are not using stasis and you're not some like amazing tier PvP player that can wreck on Dawnblade or whatever, like something else. So it is a very complicated problem that I do not have the exact answer to, and yet the longer this goes on, the more I am leaning toward the camp of like, maybe you just take it out of competitive, like at least competitive. Like I don't see how that would be worse than what we have now, even if that would be kind of an admission of defeat. But 5 months of the PvP meta being utterly upended by stasis, we're kind of there already. So I guess we'll see what happens. Lord only knows if they introduce more fragments and stuff in the next expansion, which they have threatened to do. We'll see, but I don't know. Well, I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there is a good one, because if there was, we probably would have found it already. But like, as much as I appreciate hearing everyone's suggestions, I have yet to hear a single suggestion that sounds like a truly viable fix for stasis. I think there are small things you can do, like with super freezing or reducing the accuracy penalty and being slowed, like, very minor things that would be helpful that may change in the future. But a transformative thing to make stasis at least as close to as balanced as the other three subclasses, don't see that happening. So I don't know. I am kind of losing hope, and I do not know what is going to take to change this. And fortunately, I'm not a PvP main player, so I guess it doesn't affect me as much as it does some other people who are even more dispirited. But I know that, people are just kind of getting exhausted with it. So let me know what you think about stasis in the comments. I'm curious where you think things are at, and if you're in the just play around it camp, or if you want to see it go. So yeah, let me know. This will probably be the last video I'm filming from home here. I am leaving on a trip for a little over a week. I think I'm going to bring my mic, and I'll use my laptop webcam, and I may try and record from the hotel when I'm there. I do not know how that's going to go, because I have to like download all my editing software and all that stuff on my laptop, and yeah, we'll see. But it should be interesting to say the least. But all right, I will see you guys later, and thanks for watching.